Welcome, folks. My name is Cynthia Chandler. I'm the Director of Public Interest Programs here at Golden Gate Law School. And thank you for coming out to the PIPS Day and, I should have changed this slide, the JD Accountability launch-off as well. We decided to put these two events together because the JD Accountability software is really designed to help you with networking, and PIPS Day is perhaps one of the very first extremely important networking opportunities folks have in law school. Before we get started, I just wanted to give some props to folks who have contributed to this panel today. So today this panel is sponsored by both Law Career Services as well as PILF, the Public Interest Law Foundation. Yeah, right? I said that right. And I'm going to be joined here today by Clarissa and Michelle and also Stephanie Arzaga, who will be coming in a little bit later, who are both students and part of the leadership team of PILF and who got their first jobs through Public Interest Public Sector Day. So it seemed appropriate to have them be part of today's event. And also, PILF is incredibly important for figuring out how to fund your summer experience. So they'll be giving more information on that. I also want to say thank you to Kaplan Bar Review. We have a representative here, Imran Malik. Over there. Thank you. Who provided us with lunch today in support of the launch of JD Accountability, which is, again, a really important software program that you're going to hear more about today. And we also, from LCS, have a couple of staff people here. We have the Associate Dean of Law Career Services and Alumni Services, Susanna Aronowitz, working the camera. And also Sandra Durian, who's our administrative assistant. Thank you, Sandra. And those are just two faces you should know because they're part of this central team at Law Career Services. So, okay, now we're going to get started. So again, welcome to PIPS Day orientation. First, I just want to go over a little bit about what in the world PIPS Day is. So PIPS Day is sort of a one-stop shop experience, the biggest career fair for public interest and public sector, which usually means government jobs, so nonprofit and government job employers who are interested in hiring Northern California law students. And so it's a really interesting collaborative effort where all the Northern California law schools participate and send and encourage their students to attend. And really many, if not most, of the nonprofit and government employers who want to hire folks in Northern California attend. There's two parts of it. There is a table talk or career fair component, and there is also actual interviews. So, all students, all of you will get an emailed invitation on how to participate on December 11th. And that will be coming through onejustice.org. And One Justice is our pro bono partner here at GGU Law. They create a lot of wonderful pro bono experiences. I'll pitch one towards the end that has a sign-up sheet here for over the holidays. One Justice also helps arrange the logistics for this career day. And so that's who the information will be coming from. And if you need more information, this is the website that you can go to get more information. So you'll get an email, and that email will tell you how to log in as students. And I encourage you to go ahead and log in. And also, beginning on December 11th, you can see the names of employers who are participating. So they're already listed by December 11th. And you can get a feel of the scope and breadth of the work that's done by the range of organizations that are taking part. So, once you're applying for interviews, or if you're interested or thinking about applying for interviews and you're excited about the employers who are there, you can start uploading your application materials to the website. And again, that introductory email will explain the process to you, beginning January 1st and ending January 15th. So we encourage folks to not wait until the very end. You can't estimate the number of potential glitches that you could get with students from all the Northern California law schools all trying to upload their materials all at once on the 15th. So we encourage folks to apply early. And we also encourage folks to apply directly to employers that you're particularly interested in as well. So you'd be applying through PIPS Day, and we also encourage you to research that employer and apply directly. Some employers will get so overwhelmed with the number of folks that they have to choose from for PIPS Day that they'll actually pull some of their top contenders or folks for whatever reason that they decide that they want to interview ahead of time. And they also will be interviewing people from not Northern California schools ahead of time. And so you can get your name and your application materials into the mix before PIPS Day. So the earlier you think about that and apply directly to the organization, there's a shot that you might get an even longer interview, an even more thoughtful interview in person at the location of the organization. So we encourage folks to apply separately as well, like directly, separately, and also to PIPS Day. And not to wait, again, to the last minute. Okay, so the next thing is, how should you decide where to apply? The first criteria to consider is subject area, right? And you've probably been to a number of panels so far where you're encouraged to experiment through your experiential opportunities, which includes your first summer in law school, and to test out things that you might want to do and see if it actually feels like a good fit. So we want you to think about what types of subject areas people are practicing and that seems appealing. And you also might want to think about what kinds of things you liked and disliked about past work experiences or volunteer experiences you've had in the past, and use that to help guide you in what kind of subject matter seems interesting. And there's a whole range of other considerations to take into account when deciding where to apply. The type of client, for example. Some folks really want a lot of direct client contact. Other folks really just want to be doing research and writing and aren't so jazzed about client contact. You should look at what the employer does and do some research on them to see what makes sense for you. You also want to think about what kinds of skills you want to experiment with. For example, you might really want, and you should think about what you want to accomplish with your summer. You might want to hone in your research and writing skills. You might be interested in actually being involved in litigation. You might be interested in policy analysis or legislative work. Perhaps you're more interested in community outreach and sort of public legal education. You want to think about what skills you want and find a good match with an employer. Are there things that you thought, Clarissa did PIPS Day last year? Are there things you thought about with who you applied for?
Yeah, actually, a couple of things I wanted to tag on to is when applying. So if you haven't already been able, and I'm not sure if you're able to, sometimes logging in through LCS can be a little bit intimidating, but it's actually totally usable, one I'd like to say. Just keep in mind that when you're uploading documents, because so many other people are also likely doing the same thing, that you can only keep a few of them there at a time. For example, like you can't have, I think, in excess of like 10 documents at a time when you're applying. So these are all things that you want to think about when you're submitting your application materials, because you want to obviously maximize the amount of employers you apply to, because you never know what can happen. In terms of thinking about where you should decide where you want to apply or whether or not you think it's a good fit, I actually learned this summer through my internship that actually is a big deal breaker for myself, as I'm sure later on for other people here once you go through the experience. And I find that one of the things that attracts me to places that I want to work, in addition to subject area, is the types of people that I'm going to work with. I actually had a very unique experience during my interviews, and that played a heavy factor into making my decision as to what internship that I was going to be looking at for the summer. So things to think about as well. So if you can get a little bit more background, I'm more than happy to chat with anybody. Or if you know people at the places already working or have worked, i.e. student evaluations through LCS about these places, these are all places to go and look to make sure that everything aligns with what your needs are. Because it is a two-way relationship.
Yeah. You really do want to think about what you want to accomplish for yourself over the summer. And I guess I'm saying summer, I also want to stress the fact that some folks will be applying to first step, or some folks are in HLP. You can apply for fall positions as well through PIPS Day. And in fact, many employers love that. They may actually pull out your application and ask to interview you beforehand or after the day because it's a slightly different schedule. And they may just interview you there too. It's a really, as a former employer who interviewed hundreds of people through PIPS Day over more than 15 years, I went to so many PIPS days you have no idea. Kind of both loved it and dreaded it all at once. It can actually be quite a rat race for the employers as well. There's lots of interviews back to back to back to back to back. It can feel kind of overwhelming, and sometimes it's a nice reprieve to get a fall interview because you can kind of kick back and just take it in without as many comparisons to other candidates. There's fewer folks applying for fall, and it gives you a little reprieve as an employer too. So definitely make use of this day for fall employment also. Some other things to consider that are frequent considerations that I sometimes will find that students think of after the fact about maybe why it wasn't a great fit for them are things like the pace of the office. Some people want to be in an incredibly dynamic office where they never sit down and they are running all the time. Some people like to be in environments that are very chaotic and really loud. I'm one of those people. Other folks like to be in a more sort of space that's quieter, where there's more serenity for doing more research and writing and things. You need to think about and ask about the pace and the environment that you're going to be going into. There's also an issue around results. I mean, most of these employers, the government and public interest employers, most of them are trying to make change in the world. Or trying to do services in a really challenging environment. And there's a question about what kind of impact you want to make. Are you happy with waiting on when you see the results and contributing towards a team that might be doing something that will take 10 or 20 years to see a result? Or are you someone who really wants to work with one client and see a result in an hour, right? There's a really different kind of thing to think about what the pace is, and different employers and different fields have different kinds of impact rates. Okay, applying. What in so when you apply for actual interviews, you're going to be asked to upload materials. One of the things that you're going to be asked to upload for some folks is transcripts, and you won't have official transcripts, and actually it takes up way too much data room to scan in an official transcript and upload it. And so what we will have you do instead is create an unofficial grade sheet. And there are unofficial grade sheet templates at LCS Online in our resources page. So if you click on resources and type in grade sheet, it will pop up and you can fill it in. We consider it a serious issue of moral conduct that you fill out your grade sheet accurately, right? This is a real issue. Don't start your legal career by messing up, by kind of fudging your grades. You got to do what your grades really are. Additionally, with the grade sheet, you'll see that it has room for a whole law school careers transcript, like a lot of space. You can actually delete the semesters that you haven't had yet. And in many ways, that's kind of wonderful because then it also has it on the grade sheet a description of how our grading curve works at GGU Law, and we have a fairly strict curve. So if you get rid of all the extra stuff, it pulls that description up right underneath your grades on one sheet, and makes you look like a rock star. So I recommend doing that. Do you have a question?
When, as one else, when are we going to have our first semester grades by? Is it? I mean,
Please.
I don't know. I don't have a date.
Time?
Typically in January, typically early, and it's my impression that our grades tend to come out a little bit earlier than from other schools.
Okay.
Given the early deadline for this, it's possible you don't have them. If you don't have it, then don't submit it. I mean, it's one, and you can mention that in your cover letter that grades were not available at the deadline for the submission for this program. I will be happy to bring my transcript to the interview.
Okay.
Right? And that's probably how I would finesse it at this point. It's going to be common for 1Ls, there's no reason to expect all 1Ls would have their first semester grades by January 15th. But by January 31st, when you show up for the interviews, if the employers requested it, you should be prepared to present it.
Okay. Thank you.
Additionally, you can work on all the other components of an application and upload everything else first, so you're ready. So say you have everything else done, you're just waiting for the grades, and they may in fact come out before the 15th, right? You can upload everything else, and in fact, you can always go back and retract materials and amend materials and shift what you've uploaded to things all the way up until the deadline. Once the deadline happens though, once the time period hits, I think it's at noon on the 15th or 3, and that will be in your email, the exact time, pay attention to the time zones and everything, right? Once that deadline hits, then it's locked in. What's up there is up there and loaded in, all right? So I would not recommend, if someone's asking for grades and you don't have them yet, not doing the whole application and waiting on that. I would do the rest of the application, and the grade part will be the last. Okay? And employers are not able to access the applications until that deadline has passed. So they can't see it, they're not looking at it. So the benefit you get from uploading your things early into the system is that you get the benefit that you know if there's any quirks, right? You can get help if it's not as easy as you thought it should be, or if something gets messed up, or you can change something. If you realize, oh my goodness, I have sent a cover letter with the wrong person's name on it. If that's another employer, how did I do that? You can change that, right? And actually, it's a common and very tragic error, right? You don't want to do that. This, particularly if you're applying, say you're applying to a DA job and you're applying to a PD job, right? You don't want someone with the district attorney's office to see that you've addressed them as the public defender. Just saying, not so good for showing your real commitment to working in that field, right? So what I recommend is that your files should have the name of the document, so they should say like resume, or they should say cover letter, grade sheet, and they should say the name of the employer in the saved file, so that you know where you're putting which thing, and that you resave a new version and it should be tailored for every individual employer, but you resave it with a whole new name with every time that you're doing each employer, okay? To help prevent that. Let's see. And again, apply early and separately. Applying directly is highly recommended. And if you have a problem with uploading any of your materials, you can always contact One Justice directly to ask for assistance. But again, if you're coming down to 10 minutes before the deadline, that can be really hard. So again, doing it early is important. Okay, so PIPS day interviews. First of all, you can't be guaranteed that you're going to get an interview with every employer that you apply for, right? The employers will get your materials starting on around the 16th, and they have a couple of weeks to review those materials, and then they rank who they want to interview. And they have a certain number of slots that they've signed up for, so they fill up their slots, and they may actually create a backup list as well. Because then what happens is you get an email, and I want to encourage everyone to get one of these yellow sheets, because it gives you the timeline that everything will be happening in. So you'll be notified on January 23rd of who has made an offer of an interview to you, and what time that, or actually I don't even think it's the time that, it's like which organization would like to interview you. You then have 4 days until Tuesday, January 27th, to either accept or decline an interview. All right? And then once that's done, on the 28th, you get your final interview schedule. And that interview schedule is created by all the interview acceptances, and people's schedules, all being the employer schedules that they signed up for, all being put into a big, matrix, and it all pops out. So unfortunately, you might find yourself with like one interview first thing in the morning and another interview at the very end of the day, and you can't really do anything about that. You get what you get in that way. If you accept an interview, you must go to the interview, barring extreme illness. And if you do have an extreme illness, we want you to check in with One Justice, who's organizing the care, so that they can let the employer know that you're not just not showing up, but that something very significant has happened. As an employer, I have had that happen where one person got into a car accident, for example, and was literally in the hospital. Obviously, I'm going to re-interview that person when they're better, right, and available, versus someone who just literally doesn't show up. As an employer, I would remember who that person is. The legal community is actually a small place, and people really do remember when folks don't carry through what their word is. And again, that's not how you want to start your legal career, so please don't do that. Additionally, employers are requested by the PIPSD folks to provide names of folks who do not show up for their interviews, and then it gets reported back to your school. It becomes a moral conduct issue, so people will have a conversation with you at the school, so please don't do that. If you accept an interview, have the intention to show up, right? Interviews are short. They're approximately, I think they're 20 minutes.
20 or 25.
Something, yeah.
Yeah. Frequently, employers will have them stacked back to back. There's about a 5-minute break in between, and so they can be quite brief. You want to think about how you can promote yourself best in a short period of time. So you obviously want to think ahead about what you would bring to that organization, like what skills and background you have, as well as what makes you really committed about the work. Government and nonprofit employers are usually very passion-driven people. They've made a lot of compromises and sacrifices to do the work that they do. And there's nothing that irks them more than to have someone come into an interview and not show any interest in what they do. Like, that's so insulting to that area of law. Like, people just cannot abide with that. So we want to make sure that you can convey your enthusiasm and commitment and passion for the subject, as well as what you would bring to them and to their organization in that period of time. And I'm going to be doing a more in-depth training on interviewing in January, a few days before the event.
Yes, I actually have a very quick story. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So a couple of things that Cynthia said really all kind of happened to me. First thing was I got selected for a couple of interviews. One of them I really wanted, the first one I probably talked to you about, and I ended up not getting it. And I was like, of course, heartbroken because I really wanted to work there. And I didn't make a big deal out of it. I wound up going to interviews and I got a position, but then after PIPS Day was all over, that same person, the executive director who didn't make a selection or didn't choose to proceed with my application, wound up sending me a separate email on LinkedIn saying he wants to get me into public interest day. And then I was like, well, should I tell him that he kind of rejected me before? I didn't. I didn't. I just said thank you very much, but I made other plans and I would look forward to potentially doing something in the future, and that was fine. And it turns out that over the summer, that not only did he know my executive director at the nonprofit that I worked at, he actually met him in person, and then my executive director couldn't stop raving about how great it was to work with me throughout the summer. And the reason why that particularly stood out to me was because, yes, the legal community is very small, and before I started law school for a very long time, I've heard that repeatedly, but I didn't really understand what that meant until I was put in that situation. I'm sure then if I didn't uphold my commitments or didn't keep the promises that I make to people and didn't deliver, that interaction could have gone very differently. So something that you want to think about. It seems very small, but it makes such a big difference, I feel, when you're potentially looking at prospective employers and applying to their organizations.
And so this topic of what do I do if I'm not picked, and you really, really, really want to work with an employer and you didn't get an interview, what do you do? My advice would be to keep being persistent. Hopefully you had already applied directly. You can still apply directly and separately to show your enthusiasm. And I would also encourage you to see if they're participating in the career fair component of the day, the table talk component, and be prepared with your materials to make a pitch to whoever's at the table about how really enthusiastic you would be to work there, what you would be able to bring to the table, and see if it might be possible to schedule a later interview. I've actually hired people that came up to me at table talk that I rejected in their review of their materials. I don't know if that was necessarily because their cover letter didn't really make them shine, and didn't really convey the things that they were able to show me in person, or if it was their incredible enthusiasm and a second pitch, whatever it was. I can very vividly remember 2 people that I hired that way. Many organizations will also have the folks staffing the Table Talk area, they'll have them equipped with like a way to store and create notes on people that they think are particularly viable candidates. And so if you make a great impression in Table Talk, it can really make a difference about giving you a second chance. The other thing is to think about an externship during the year, or also an internship in another semester or another summer. Just because you get rejected once does not mean that folks never want to work with you. It might be that the timing and the composition of who they're looking for that summer was just off. They may have, for example, taken a lot of people from out of state in for the summer, and they didn't have a lot of space for folks who are local. And maybe they would really love to have folks in the fall or the spring. We're really fortunate here to have an externship program that allows students to work at many wonderful employers who are local during the year. And so that might be another way to approach them too, is to say, hey, I didn't get an interview, or remain incredibly excited about the idea of working with your organization in the future. Perhaps I could meet with you to talk about the possibility of an externship position during the year. And that's another way to get your foot in the door. So, Table Talk, that is the career fair. Do you?
Yeah.
Want to do it?
Sure.
Okay.
So Table Talk at PIPSA, like Cynthia said earlier, again, it's kind of like a career fair type thing where, of course, you walk in, there are plenty of tables, and then prospective employers all there want to tell you about themselves, what they're doing, and obviously to answer any questions that you may have. One of the things I didn't do, and I wish I had, was if there was an employer, for whatever reason, I didn't have an opportunity to apply to by the deadline, or for whatever reason I wasn't chosen, I would have liked, looking back retrospectively, to have made a list of all the people that I knew that were going to be there, and then come with an attack plan, so that way I'm not overwhelmed when I walked in, and that's what ended up happening to me, and I was like, oh my god, there's too much going on, and I wound up just hanging out and waiting for my interviews. I'd highly advise, like, if for whatever reason you were in the same situation I was and didn't have an opportunity to apply directly to these people, that you want to make a list of who you think you want to go speak to and have your materials ready, because you never know, you can get an on-the-spot interview right then and there, and then that can be a determining factor.
So generally, I encourage folks to go to the Table Talk component for a variety of reasons. Obviously, as we've already talked about, if you're just playing the game to get a specific job, you want to make sure you go to that booth and have a whole game plan on pitching yourself, right? Obviously. There's also a bigger, broader networking goals of it. It's an amazing way to get a sense of the landscape of the public interest in government community and the Bay Area or Northern California. From that, you can start making contacts with people who do things that you're interested in. You can also experiment and just learn about different areas of law that maybe are kind of intriguing to you, but you really don't know a whole lot about. You can go to a table and have basically an informational interview on the spot, where you say, what does this kind of practice look like? How did you get into it? What inspires you with doing this? What kinds of opportunities are there in this field? You can have those kinds of conversations very informally with folks at Table Talk in a way that, there's not a really great high stake to it. They're just there, hanging out. Everyone who's there wants to talk to people. It's really, really miserable to be at a career fair and have no one at your booth, right? So they want to talk about what their work is, and they're there. You might as well make use of it. Additionally, some organizations may have positions and may not, for whatever reason, may have decided not to do interviewing at the event. So there's many of the folks who are interviewing are also at Table Talk. Some folks that interview are not at Table Talk. And then some folks are at Table Talk and not interviewing, maybe because of their own staff resources or other things going on for their organization. And so it's a great way to find and learn about employers who maybe weren't interviewing there, but you could potentially apply to be interviewed later as well. So it's a great thing. The other thing is that you do not need to sign up for Table Talk. So if you're doing the interviewing, you have that deadline on the 15th of January, and you must meet that deadline. There are really virtually no exceptions. There actually is the day of PIPS day. You can line up with first come first serves to try to get any free spots that have appeared because of cancellations or other things. And you can try to wiggle your way into an employer that way. But for the most part, you really need to ahead of time plan it out. For table talk, you can just go. And I also really recommend this for night students who maybe are in their first year and not thinking about working or volunteering so much until maybe they're in their third year. It's a great way to just go. You don't have to sign up ahead of time, and you can learn about the wealth and diversity of the legal field while you're there. It's a great way to expose yourself to many different kinds of law and different modes of practice.
No, I think so.
Okay, can you just mention how there's so many employers who are table talk that they're actually in two
Oh, yes.
rooms because sometimes students don't realize
Yes.
that they've.
So there's a separate space for the government employers and a separate and the nonprofit employers. So there's two separate rooms, and really that's because there's too many to have them in one room, so they've divided them that way. And you should feel free to hop between those two rooms. They're usually in buildings that are right across the street from each other, and there should be signage and many folks. There's staff from the law schools volunteering to help organize the whole thing and be kind of like helpers at the day. And if you can't figure out where you need to be for the kind of the employers you're looking for, if you need to know where the other room is, the staff can help direct you over and make sure you get there. Yep.
Are all of the positions available volunteer positions?
No. So some of them are paid positions, some of them are volunteer positions. There's usually some indication of that in the job description that's posted, and it's reasonable to ask if you're interested to find out if they're compensated or not compensated. You also could wait and see if you get an interview and have that be a conversation that comes up then if you feel like it's an awkward thing to bring up at first, but most folks are fairly transparent about it. And we're also going to have a conversation about funding when we get to the end of this, of how to fund the summer if you're doing volunteer positions. And I do want to be clear that most government and nonprofit positions for this summer are unpaid. There are some other options though, like work study, like grants through PILF and other things that can help make it a viable choice. Okay. Okay. What to wear? Preparation. Okay. Okay. So I feel very strongly, I think those of us at LCS feel very strongly that you should treat PIPS Day like a real formal business interview setting. So suits are the norm, and that's the sort of business attire norm. There can sometimes with some employers be an exception to that. I would say do not deviate from that norm unless you are 100% certain that that employer has a radically different culture and you are not interviewing with any other employer, right? Unless you want to then go home and change and then come back, okay? So suits are really important. If folks want to strategize the nuances of exactly what to wear, like color for a particular employer, how formal of a suit, how conservative of a look, all those kinds of things are very relevant for different jobs. I mean, and different nonprofits and government offices have very different vibes about what's appropriate. Please feel free to use Locker Services as a resource in that, and you know, we've all of us there have had whole conversations with people about exactly what to wear, what kind of a bag to go carry your materials and to go with your outfit. Like, how do you project yourself in a way that promotes the image that you want to have for that particular employer? And those things really do matter. So I would say take it really seriously and absolutely wear a suit. Again, unless you 100% know otherwise. I would also extend that sort of conservatism down to footwear as well. My whole life have worn some really outlandish footwear. And what I wear around GGU law is not what I would wear to a job interview, and what I wear at GGU law is not what I wear at home even. And I worked for about 20 years in a legal profession, a legal field, working with women in prison where outrageous footwear was fine with my clients. Not a problem. That's also not what I'm going to wear on a first impression interview. So again, I would extend the conservatism to footwear as well, okay?
Also, going to be on your feet a lot.
And you're going to be on your feet all day, running back and forth from, you may have one interview upstairs and down a long hall from another one, and you have like 3 minutes to get there, right? So comfort is important, and walking around the career fair as well. Okay. What to bring? You want to make sure that you have a full set of the materials that they requested. You never know what might happen with the employer. The person who would be doing the interviews could have suddenly woken up with a terrible flu, and they had to call a coworker, and someone else is coming in, and there was no time to go to the office to get a whole new set of all the application materials, right? Make it easy for your audience to know who you are, right? So bring an extra set. They may have a second person along with them, and they only have one set of the materials. Just bring an extra set along. You can also feel free to bring other commonly requested things even if they didn't ask for it, like references or writing samples. Your grade sheet, for example. If they want it, they'll take it. If they don't want it, they won't. And you're fully prepared in terms of what you brought along with you. And make sure that you store them in a way that doesn't get them all wrinkled and schmutzy and funky. So you want to have them like in some sort of a folder that keeps them flat, some sort of a bag that's not going to mush them up and jostle them around, so that you come off looking very crisp, professional through your materials. Let's see. And then in terms of how to present yourself, you certainly want to be able to present yourself professionally. I want you all to be able to have pride in introducing yourself and saying your name and having a nice, strong handshake. Those things really matter. From your first introduction and saying hello, you're smiling, that's true.
And yeah, I'm smiling because it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Can't do a lazy handshake.
Yeah, do not do the lazy handshake. Okay.
Even in terms of presenting yourself, they're going to be wearing name tags.
Yes.
So you're going to be wearing a name tag, and in fact, we become the name tag police. You can only be in the space if you're wearing a name tag. That's how we know you're from one of the sponsoring schools. But take care with your name tag. Print your name, first name and last name neatly. Often students will put their name and where they go to school. So you could put, Cynthia Chandler, GGU. But if you just wrote Cynthia and you're going through that table talk and they've met 100, how would they ever know which Cynthia you were? So little things like that actually go a long way. And so it's part of the way that you're presenting yourself.
Yeah. And I know last year there was a problem with the name tags that they weren't very adhesive. They were just rolling off. They were just falling off, right? And there were some students who solved the problem by just grabbing a whole extra sheet and they just reproduced a new name tag whenever they needed a name tag. And I was like, that is resourceful. That's what you want to do. If your name tag is not working, don't give up on the name tag. Go get one, right? And so I think it really is important that you're considering how you're presenting yourself. You are your own brand, right? So you want to make sure that it comes off well. And again, I'm going to do trainings both on navigating the career fair component as well as the interviewing, where we'll talk much more about the content of how you're promoting yourself. I will say that if you're someone who's nervous about things like this, like nervous about going and introducing yourself, we're going to talk a bit more about Lawcountability, JD, coming up and the resources they have on that to help coach people through that kind of networking. I also encourage folks to practice, and to sort of role play it out in terms of how you do that first initial introduction and introducing yourself. I'm a ridiculous cardio junkie and do lots of exercises. There's a common psychological practice done for athletes where in sports psychology, where if you have a really difficult, challenging event that you're training for, they'll have folks sort of sit back, close their eyes, and envision themselves doing it with all the right form, and their body just does it the right way. And then the studies have shown that then your body and your mind actually do connect and you do the right form. So even if you don't have someone that you can go up to and shake hands with and introduce yourself, you can sit back, imagine, visualize yourself going through this event, introducing yourself, and it's going really smoothly. People smile at you, they're happy to meet you, right? You go through the whole thing. It's a way of building up your confidence as well as your actual skill for the event. So I encourage you to do that. How to prepare. Please do research on employers that you meet at PIPSA. And some employers have better websites than others, and some have more information about them on the web or not. try to at least know who the key staff leadership are. So for example, if you go up to a booth and it turns out you're face-to-face with the executive director of an organization, you're not saying, oh, gee, when did you start working there? Why do you like working there? It's a slightly different kind of question you ask the head boss who runs the thing, right? Like hopefully they like their job or they'd be gone, right? So I ran an organization for many years that I founded, and people would ask me that question all the time. Oh, why did you decide to work there? I'm like, well, I started it. I created this, so I'm kind of stuck with what I made, right? And then that's awkward. It is, right? Try to know who the key leadership are of where you're applying to, as well as much as you can about what they might be in the news for, with hot topics they're working on, current cases they have, things that are going on. And that's even, you may not do that for everyone at Table Talk, it's too big of a list, but if you have a top 5 or a top 10 organizations that you really are kind of intrigued by, check them out. If you suddenly learn about one there, and you're like, that's so cool, you can go research on your phone in another room and then come in, right? So that you show that you have some baseline knowledge of who you might be meeting and what you'd be talking to them about. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's it's nail on the head.
Okay. So making decisions. Okay, so making decisions, and again I'm going to do another training around interviewing, which will have much more on this, but I do want to say that so there are some employer rules and timelines that employers are given for participating in the career fair, and they're supposed to give students a reasonable time to decide whether or not they want to accept or decline offers. The problem that employers have is that it is a rat race for them too. It is also a stressful environment, and they're saying, oh no, I love this candidate, but probably everybody else loves this candidate. I want this person, I want to offer this person something right here, right now. And then they think, oh no, but if they take 3 weeks to decide, and then they reject the offer in 3 weeks, all of my second choices will be gone. Oh no, because other people will have rushed to give them an offer right away, and then what will I do? So what employers will frequently do is try to give the shortest amount of turnaround time as they possibly can. They are bound to do some sort of reasonable amount. I think it's completely reasonable to ask for a week. Some employers will not give a week. You can decide if you think that's playing nice or not, and if it's a good fit with the organization, right? There are ways to communicate the need to have an extension of time in a way that's not insulting and works well with employers. I encourage you to work with folks at Law Career Services to actually role play how you can communicate your need to have more time and whether you can have an extension with an offer. But the things you don't want to do is, we already talked about no-shows, but don't make an acceptance to an offer and then renege on that offer later, right? So say you know that you have some amazing opportunity out there percolating. You've applied to do this amazing international thing where you can fly halfway across the world and do fabulous work, and it's only offered this one summer and never again, okay? And that is out there. You don't even know the timeline on that. It's just in the works somewhere. And then you get this offer from someone who's extremely enthusiastic about you, and they want you to have 2 days to make up your mind. And you're like, oh, what do I do? Right? What you don't want to do is say yes, and then find out in 2 months that the folks out there in the world have picked you, and then go to that same employer and say sorry. I personally have an enormous pet peeve around that. So employers put a lot of time and attention into figuring out how to make their cohort for the summers or the fall or whatever fit their needs as well as fit their demographic needs and all kinds of things. And when you muck with it that way, you're basically taking an opportunity away from someone else that could have accepted it. And you're also throwing that organization's plan all off. And the clients suffer as a result. And so that's something that employers remember. Like I remember people who have done that with me over the years. Like I literally remember. And I have encountered those same people in the public interest community later, and I still remember, right? So don't do that. It also is another one of those things that gets reported back to the school, and it's considered a pretty serious, character issue if you do that. It's your first chance of accepting a contract as a budding lawyer. You don't want to renege on the contract, right? That's not cool. So before you accept, don't just jump and say, woohoo, they like me, yes. Before you do that, what you do instead is you say, oh, I'm so excited that you made this offer to me. I'm honored. How much time do I have to get back to you, right? And then they say, oh, you can get back to us in this much time. And you say, oh, great. And then you run over to LCS and ask for advice on what you might have to do for other things that are outstanding, okay? And if you need an extension, how to communicate that nicely and all that. Okay. Okay, so this whole career day, it has a lot to do with networking and starting the process of building your professional profile. And that's really all that our partners work at Lawcountability is about, is helping you build your professional profile. And I know folks have gotten emails about checking this thing out and checking out this Lawcountability thing. And some folks have and have started using it, and other folks haven't. I would like to personally challenge folks to look into it before PIPS Day, because I think it's a great way, number one, to build up your skills in preparation for it, but it's also a great way to have a plan for how to follow up, okay? So here's a quote, inspirational quote from a 2L who's using it, who thinks it's just fabulous. But I wanted us to also talk about what I think makes it a really great resource. So one of the things that you can do with Lawcountability, JD, is you can actually create your own networking goals and plan it out. So say you're like, okay, I'm going to go to this PIPS day, and I'm going to research these folks, 10 groups that are at this career fair, and I'm going to figure out like those ones I'm really interested in. I'm going to research them, and I'm then going to take Clarissa's advice and make a plan for how I'm going to approach them. Right, and that's my second goal. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to see and I'm going to have my materials ready. And I'm going to go meet with them. And then I'm going to follow up. I'm going to have a follow-up plan of how I can say thank you and figure out if there's an ask. Do you really want to interview with them? Do you want to, or do you maybe want to meet about an externship later, or just thank them and like keep them as someone that you're keeping as a contact for later, or maybe you want an informational interview. But you have a plan for your follow-up. You can map all of that out for Lawcountability, and we'll send you little email prompts that remind you. You can also designate a pal as your accountability partner who can also give you rewards and perks and BHAs when you do it, right, and encourage you on. And when you meet your own goals, you get points, and if you win a lot of points, you get Pete's coffee card from Law Career Services, which is also cool, right? So you get some perks. The other thing that the program has is a whole list of videos, and every week there's a new 10-minute video aimed at helping you with networking, and then there's also a lot of other ones that you can look through and watch again and again, or over and search through. This is a list of recent videos that have come up. And I think a lot of them are really helpful for PIPS Day, like how to overcome social discomfort, that sort of awkwardness of going into a room and introducing yourself to people when you don't necessarily know what they do. You know, how to target your audience, how to cultivate your personal brand. All of these things are things that will help you for PIPS Day, whether you're interviewing and or just networking. So I really want to encourage folks to make use of it. So I'd recommend that if you feel too overwhelmed now, going up on exams, make this as your holiday goal to tap into Lawcountability, JD, and start feeling comfortable with it. Watch some videos, think about if there's anything you'd like to create up an accountability plan for yourself with around goals, and test it out and see if it really works. Okay? So, once you land that thing, then you have to fund it.
Yes,
Yes.
it's always about money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hi everybody again. Obviously some of you are already TOEFL members, so we kind of heard the spiel yesterday. But for those of us who are here now who haven't heard of PILF, or otherwise known as the Public Interest Law Foundation, or have not been able to make it to any of our meetings, we were started in 1989 by a group of students, student-run organizations for students by students. And just to be brief, it's more about, yes, we are doing all these things to extend legal services to underdeveloped communities or towards underrepresented civil rights or environmental law issues that are out there facing our community and world. And a lot of times nonprofits, for example, or even the district attorney's office internship or local public defenders are either unfunded or oftentimes pro bono, fully pro bono, so for free, which means students are not accounted for, they're not paid for these internships. And that shouldn't be a reason to discourage any one of us from really giving back to our community and looking for opportunities such as this. And with that said, PILF every year has an annual auction. Sorry. Yeah, but
Okay, pass this.
yeah, because we kind of talked about that.
Okay.
So every year, PILF has the annual auction / gala raffle, and the purpose behind that is to go ahead and raise as much money as possible through through raffles as well as actual donation items from people in the community, to then hopefully pass that on to students in the form of a grant to help subsidize the cost of their summer internships. With that said, we have the 2015 spring / fall, I meant to say summer / fall PILF grants to go ahead and fund these students ourselves, who do decide to go into public sector work. So how's the grant money raised? As I said before, it's the annual auction and raffle, which tends to be our biggest fundraising event of the year. There are a few others that are not related to the auction, but you get more information on that obviously if you signed in here this afternoon in regards to other fundraising opportunities.
Like you just had one, right?
I didn't know we can say that. Yes, we did have one. We did have one. It was actually a guest bartending event at Tonic. And that was kind of cool because I decided to throw myself in the hat to, serve drinks. Probably should never do that again because I'm terrible. But from that, we were able to raise quite a bit of money. I think it was roughly about $650. And we're looking to raise some more money through a variety of fundraising events such as guest bartending or having restaurants dedicate X amount of their proceeds or tips to PILF because it's for a good cause. They want to have people like us who are willing to help, obviously, and then we want to make sure that we are taken care of as well to go ahead and subsidize the costs throughout the summer, especially if you live in San Francisco. Who are we kidding? Everybody's broke and it's incredibly expensive. Side note to that, the auction is officially set for April 10th of 2015. And that should be at 111 Minna, and that's from 5 to 10 p.m. in the spring. In front of you, or you might have, I guess you've gone. Yeah, in front of you, you might have grabbed a couple of materials related to PILF if you hadn't gotten one already from yesterday. One is the PILF auction, the grant applications for the summer and fall of 2015. Some of the requirements are located on page 2 of the application. And I did post them on there as well, but very generic. Most of the things that you're probably going to be doing anyway, so why not apply if you're already doing these things most likely. Obviously, you're going to be, an applicant is going to be a current Golden Gate School of Law student for the upcoming summer and fall semester, that you have a public interest or government employer for that summer or fall of 2015, and all the employers that said he had briefly mentioned earlier, i.e. PIPS Day. And I'll skip over the next one, but another requirement is that each applicant sells at least 3 tickets to the auction, as well as 3 raffle tickets. Work the night of the auction. There are only so many things that 4 people could handle, so any help at all would be greatly appreciated. Securing auction items, that is a total worth about $250. A couple of notes on that. Obviously, it can be one item that's worth $250, or it could be a variety of items that aggregately amounts to $250. Some of the things that we have already secured are a bed and breakfast overnight stay in Yosemite, for example, with complimentary breakfast and dinner, massages, wine tastings, things of that nature. So any of those things are help. And the idea is to really get the rest of our community engaged. Like, yes, our wonderful professors are very kind and they do offer things as well, but we secretly really just want them to bring some of their colleagues if they're still practicing, because that would obviously help us out, so that way they can fund our pot to then in turn give that money in grant form.
So I just want to add to that, if you want a diversity of people to come to the auction, think about things that you can get donated that a diversity of people would want to bid on.
Yeah.
And that's true. And I just want to say that I look forward to every year donating the thing that I bid, or I donate, which is a trip for two to Alcatraz for a progressive alternative tour with me and a few formerly imprisoned people. And going to Alcatraz for a progressive alternative prisons tour with a bunch of former prisoners. You can do that with me. It's fun. It's really fun.
It could be an interesting boat
It's
ride.
fun.
And it's about the relationships.
So that's what I do. It was actually an incredibly amazing experience last year.
And then generally this overall involvement in PILF, obviously everybody's welcome to apply. We take all applications. Another document you probably might have snatched off of the when you signed in was the donation form. So if a donor is willing to donate something, hopefully they are. So the top portion of that form is very brief. It's just the top part you're going to return to PILF. And there will be some communication about how to go about doing that, etc. Just so we can keep a track of what actually is being donated, so that way we can put it on the list of auction items. The bottom half, it's very small, but there is the school's tax ID that would allow the donors to then claim a tax exemption. I guess if they're donating in 2015, it will be their 2016 taxes, right? Yeah? But,
In 16.
yeah, but for 15, yes. Thank you very much. So they want to go ahead and make sure they keep a recording of that for their business purposes if they're an employer or just a regular individual who's willing to donate. And again, the more the better. Items that we have to sell at the auction block, that will be greatly appreciated.
So other things, other ways to fund summers, some students have figured out ways to get work study, and you can learn more about that from the financial aid office. There are also other kinds of summer grants or fellowships available. Many of them are identity-based in terms of the clientele that will be served by your work and or the identity of the student themselves. And I try to post those when I see them on the public interest Facebook page. So there's frequently ones, for example, I don't know, working with immigrants from the global south, for example, or fellowships to make women's dreams come true by giving them great training opportunities, or other things like that. And there can be a variety of different ways that you can try to supplement your income over the summer by applying to those kinds of small grants as well. So that's it. Before we go, I have a couple of announcements. One is just to say thank you to Capital Bar Review again for a great lunch. Yay.
Thank you.
And the other is to say that, you know, our partner in PIPSA is One Justice, who also does do amazing pro bono opportunities for us and our students. I put over here some flyers and I'm just going to grab them and show them. There's information about an upcoming Marin holiday clinic. It's 2 days, December 29th and 30th, and students can work, and there's a sign-up sheet. They only take 10 slots, so fill it up. And you work 2 days at Legal Aid in Marin County and do all kinds of amazing direct service tasks. It's a great way to start filling in your resume and start developing official legal skills, and I encourage folks to do that, as well as to just generally sign up with One Justice to get their email newsletters and take advantage of the opportunities that they provide our students. And that's it. Do folks have questions?
Hi, Jen.
Right there. What about getting credit for some of this?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if all of them offer credit per se, but can you apply for the school to get credit for?
You can get units to do externships, and most employers are completely fine with folks doing externships. You just have to work that out with the school you would also be taking an externships seminar along with it and figuring out how many hours you will do to get however many units you're going to do. And I would say that, you know, employers are also not opposed to people doing part-time work and or split summers. They would just need to know when you're applying that that's what you're doing. So for example, I had folks apply to work with me who are working 20 hours a week with me and then working at some other completely unrelated thing in order to raise money for themselves over the summer. You would just need to be forthright about what your plans are with your employers. Similarly, if you're getting units, when you're getting units to work a part-time schedule, you could choose, do you want to work full-time and get units for part of that? And then the other stuff would be pro bono, and I would encourage you to keep track of it for our Pro Bono Honor Society, for example. Or would you want to work part-time in accordance with how many units you would be getting? And figure that out. And Sandra, can you raise your hand again? Is also the administrative assistant for the externship program, and likely could talk with folks in more detail about how you can earn units for that. And then Professor Benedetta Dietz is the head of the externship program also, for another contact.
To add on to that, if you get academic credit, can you also get financial aid for living expenses over the summer as well? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have,
Depending on the parameters required for financial aid, which you should talk to the financial aid officer.
Okay.
And you can still apply for a grant as well.
Right,
That,
of
that
course.
doesn't bar you from.
Yeah, we should be transparent though, that if you're getting
Yes.
financial aid, and or work study too, this is
Yeah.
good, then you get a PILF grant, what happens is that amount of money reduces your award,
Okay.
so you borrow less, it doesn't feel like more goes into your pocket,
Right.
okay? So just want to be transparent about it.
Yeah, so, yeah, I didn't speak to that because I got a grant last year and I remember it was really complicated figuring out that. So if you're not in a situation where you don't need to have financial aid or you have different financial aid grants, then if you want that money to go in your pocket to be able to spend it, you would have to not be getting credit. So what my
Okay.
understanding was. So you would be just doing pro bono work and saying, I'm not also earning, this other. Yeah, it's complicated, but depending on how you want to receive that money, you can, if you have that flexibility, you can do it a different way.
I also just want to point out that the PILF grant, just like how PIPSA you can apply for the fall, the PILF grants can apply for fall internships as well if you're doing a summer program, school program, and doing your internship in the fall instead. And back.
As we go out and get these donations, we can go online and get this form and
Actually, yes. If you've signed in, thank you for bringing that up. So I think someone's passing around the PILF sign-in sheet. A couple of things I wanted to say about that is, one, if you go ahead and put your name on there, you're kind of like fulfilling one of the grant requirements anyway by just being here this afternoon, for example. So you might want to make sure that you sign the sign-up sheet. To that end, if your email address is on there, we're going to send a little bit more details about how to, send these forms back and any other communications relating to the grant. We would go ahead and send that in an email form that we're currently working on pushing that out. Exactly. Ideally though, typically, for example, if the auction is April 10th of 2015, I hope that like a good 2-3 weeks before then we would already know, like, hey, I'm offering this thing for the grant. But ultimately, the application is due a couple of weeks later. Again, you get an email about deadlines and that kind of stuff. But you should, once you communicate it to us, and you can do that all through the email address listed in the application, I believe it's the 3rd page. And any questions as well, you can go ahead and do that. And we are working on a one-stop shop for PILF website, all of which would come in an email form to let you know that that is up and running as well.
Any other questions? Okay, so thank you all for coming. Feel free to check in with Law Career Services if you need help. We'll be having also on the sheet, we're having drop-in hours to work on your resume and cover letters when you come back in the beginning of January and then into the first week of school. And make use of us to help you have the greatest application possible. All right? Thank you.